What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Ham Radio Crash Course. Welcome to Saturday. Boy, crazy week, huh, everybody? It's been a crazy year so far. But I'm glad we can take a little moment here, have some fun with amateur radio. Working together, learning some things, hopefully. We'll be taking questions. I will likely take all call-ins for the after chat, so if you want to talk and ask your question kind of live audio, we'll be doing that in the Discord after the fact. So make sure to note the link in the description for our after chat there on the Discord. So we hope you join us. But we will take questions in the chat as we go. Anyway, let's go ahead and flip on over. Again, thanks for making it on out here. And hey, everybody. So I am Josh, KI6NAZ. Thanks again for joining us out here. If you have not already, I'd like it if you gave me a thumbs up. That would be wonderful. Thanks for doing that. Appreciate it. If this is your first time, hit subscribe. I'd love that. Anyway, so today we're going to be talking about mobile radio installations in automobiles, right? So VHF, UHF, HF. And I guess it's not just automobiles. We're going to be just talking about mobile radios kind of in general. So just should be a fun talk. This is actually the patron picks episode. Patreon, over on Patreon, we have the patrons select the topic for the first month's stream, and this was what was voted on. I think we had like close to 20 different options, and this was the one that made it. It was a three-way tie this time. We had to have a lightning round tiebreaker to select this, so I'm very excited. So this is good, very, very good. Lots of fun discussions, lots of all kinds of interest in different topics. So I wanted to throw a big shout out over to Quirky QRP. By the way, we're going to be talking about Field Day probably next weekend and the weekend after that. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something fun, hopefully, for Field Day. So I want to give a shout out here to Quirky QRP, always with the quirky items, no question. James Hannibal, who might be in the chat, he's sometimes out here. Appreciate him making it if he did. Sent me over one of these finger Morse CW straight key for portable ham radio operating. Let me show you what that looks like. Actually, I've got it wired up here, but that's the link. Link's in the description too if you're interested in it. It's pretty inexpensive. Let me show you what it looks like. Okay, so I've got my Xiegu X5105 right here. And let me get it on the dummy load really quick so we're not screwing with anybody. But I've got it on my X5105. And it is a Velcro finger loop with a little toggle on the top, little toggle button. And you just kind of put your finger in there, right? And give it a... Pretty cool. I've noticed when playing around with it, you kind of have to like on and off, like you make sure you get your finger off of that. You can't really like hold it really close and try to get real fast action. Very cool. Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. James always comes up with some like really cool stuff, so I wanted to say thank you to him for letting me take a look at that. That's super cool, super fun. So what do we got in the chat? I saw Good Game Ham Radio. Hey, my wife is in the house. Is there software that translates Morse code? Yes, there is, although it can be a little sketchy. It's not always the best. Let's see. Yeah, I see Good Game. I saw Mike. There's Mike. Ham Radio TV's in there too, it sounds like. Thanks everybody for coming out. A lot of people in here, right on. So yeah, thank you everybody for making it out. Yep. There's the code reader that Good Game Ham Radio reviewed is pretty good. Oof Radio, Michael Yafredo's there. Very cool. Thanks for making it out. Okay, so yeah, exactly. Who said that? Huge respect to people who learn CW. Indeed, it's not the easiest thing to learn, that's for sure, but it does have a lot of advantages over single sideband. particularly that it takes up much smaller bandwidth space. So technically your power is getting out more effectively. Also, CW is just dits and DAWs, so it's very easy for you to hear it and be able to decipher it or decode it in your head way down in the noise. So always think about learning CW. You should definitely do that. It's good to know. All right. Ooh. Today I'm drinking mahogany. This is called mahogany beer. In my crash course glass, guys, we are so close to having merch available. My wife is in the chat. She's probably working on the website right now, which is going to be awesome once I release it, because I want to show you some of the funny things she's done. Actually, I want you to just kind of find it yourself. The little Easter egg she's put into the website. Flying Squirrel VE7 ODA. Thanks for all the advice on SDR antennas and the 705. I went and ordered one instead of waiting. Ha ha. Very good. Well, congratulations and thank you for the support. I appreciate that. Very good. All right. So what are we talking about? All right. Mobile, HF, VHF, and UHF radios. Again, this is a very broad topic, and we've covered, mobile radios many times on the stream before. So I'm going to be taking this more towards the setup and particular things that I have had to figure out through kind of my trial and error process, through searching online, looking at videos. A lot of what you're seeing me do is, like, when I do these videos, it's because I've gone through it and I've banged my head against the wall and kind of came out the other end, and so I have kind of my thoughts on, how you should do it. Now, all of my recommendations are just my recommendations, and I am telling you what I recommend, but there's lots of other ways you can do things, and if it works, and if you get on the air, then it's successful, so don't worry too much about what I think specifically. Somebody says, is there merch yet? No, not yet. We're working on it. I mean, there is merch. We just got to get the website sorted out so that, we can get it to everybody in the easiest way possible. So I want to do this really quick. How do I view the comments? Let's do that. Well, that's not going to work. Never mind. Okay. Let's dive right into this. Don R., we love the HRCC videos. Thank you, from Washington. Hey, appreciate it, Don. Thank you so much. Okay, so here's some of my. Oop, I'm slipping and clipping. Hold on. Burp, 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 burp. All right, there's now all the slides are on the window. So here's some of my mobile radios. I think that's all of them except the 2730A that I have from ICOM. I like that radio. It's kind of right in front of my 7300. I don't have it connected because I only have one VHF UHF antenna in my house, and that's currently connected to that Alinco you see in the middle there. But kind of going left to right, that is an FT891 from Yaesu on the top, and then below that is an FTM 400. Next to that is an Alinco, what is that, 135? Yeah, DR135. Specifically, that is a VHF only radio, but it allows for connection to a TNC. It actually has an internal TNC, not a great TNC, but has an internal TNC. So you can use this for packet radio, APRS, digipeating, all kinds of stuff. And then in the truck on the far right side is a TYT 9800. And great radio as well. I really like that radio. It's really consistent. It's been in the body of it's shoved up under the dashboard and has been there for well over 5 years, I believe. Okay, so if you're just starting out and you're hearing me say the term mobile radios, what am I talking about? So there are some exceptions to this, but the general rule is it's a 50-watt mobile radio, and mobile means like portable, but likely you put it in a car and use it in a car. And that's VHF and UHF. If you have an HF mobile, then it's likely 100-watt output. There is an exception where there is a mobile that is 200-watt output, which is pretty nice. With that said, it's generally the case VHF, UHF 50 watts, HF 100 watts. They generally require their own external power source or power supply. They don't have an internal battery. You have to provide a battery. You have to provide a power supply. And they generally require an external antenna. And right, the exception is like an HT has an antenna on it. Not so with a portable radio. You're going to run coax likely to some place where the antenna is, where the antenna is fixed, mounted, whatever. And you can use all mobile radios generally as an acceptable base station in your home. There are tons of people who use base stations for their home shack, right? VHF, UHF. I have 2 right here in my home shack that work great. T-Man, KI5BEZ, keep up the great work. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. Oh, 556, very nice. I get it. I get what you're throwing out there. Very good. Yeah, in fact, I would say that in the VHF UHF market, there really isn't that many base stations available anymore that are being sold. The exception would be the 9700, right? The ICOM 9700. And there are a couple more that are all band, like the Yaesu 991 comes to mind, and that includes VHF UHF as well. But if you're just talking like VHF UHF base station radios, there's not a whole lot, so people generally go with these mobiles. There's some downsides to that, though, that we'll talk about. Okay, so the value of a mobile radio. Sausalito Steve, thanks for your help with the technician exam and overall understanding. Great job. KN6IZD. Well, thank you very much, Sausalito Steve. I like that name, too. It's like Chicago Ted. Sausalito Steve. Right on. The value of mobile radios is that they're sized, pretty decently. The image that you're looking at there is of my FT891, my Yaesu FT891. Great little radio. Not just good in the car, but also good in the field. I know K8MRD has one. I know a lot of other people have them, and they're pretty okay. I won't say they're fantastic. They're pretty okay for some reasons I'll talk about here. VHF UHF mobiles are generally pretty easy to install and set up and program. At least that's been my experience. And that they're largely kind of plug and play. If you give it the right power and you give it a decent antenna, it's going to work, right? And again, we're talking mainly VHF, UHF and that. And then the operation of them, I think, is pretty straightforward. There are some that have different operations to them, but by and large, if you're just talking about turning it on, going through the channels, and talking, pretty straightforward. However, Joseph Anthony says the 991A seems more than just a mobile. Yeah, I wouldn't call it a mobile. It's not on this list. It's a base station. We were talking about base stations. So some of the cons of mobile radios, and you're looking at one of the cons on that image, is that, so first, they lack kind of the features that you would expect in a base station. For VHF, UHF mobile radios, in fact, I can't think of one that has single sideband. They're all FM pretty much, or digital, but generally they lack single sideband, AM, that kind of stuff. The HF, it's lacking the advanced filtering that you would expect, advanced digital signal processing features, DSP in this case, and many of the mobiles I've played with have extremely cluttered menus. Wow. This being the example, the FT891 has you hold down that F button, that lower left soft button that says F on it, and it brings up this just scrolling menu of pretty archaically titled controls. L-cut frequency, L-cut scope, H-cut frequency. I don't know what that means off the top of my head. I have to go read the manual for it and stuff like that, although that's for AM settings. I'm not usually playing with AM, but they can be kind of cumbersome because they're small, right? They've got not a lot of screen space, difficult times displaying information, etc. Jordan Anchorman, thanks. Is it Ankin Man? Thanks so much for all you've taught me and the contagious excitement for the art. Oh, thank you. I'm taking my test tomorrow afternoon. I'm super excited. Right on. Very good. Thank you. Oh, we got a shout out for William. Hey, Josh, been watching for a few years and finally got my license this week. KO for ear. Thanks for all the great information. Oh, if you got ear spelled like that randomly given to you, that's pretty good. Yeah. So anyway, those are some of the cons with mobile radios. All right, so installing a mobile radio. I'm going to make this as simple as possible for everybody. How to power your radio. 12-volt batteries will power your radio, but most likely they're going to be giving out like 13.5 if you were using like a power supply. So like a plugged-in wall power supply, 13.5 volts is kind of what you can expect. When it comes to direct to your car, you're connecting it direct to your car. Connect it directly to your car's battery. Run the wires through the firewall. Get it connected to your battery. Trust me, you want to do that. Benno upgraded to General this week. Thanks for all your help and giving me an excuse to drink beer at 5 on Saturday. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that, Jim. Very good. Yeah, so when you're connecting to your car radio to your car, you want to go direct to the battery. This is an image of my car, one of my cars. The wire just goes directly to the connector. Now, you can do a lot of different ways to connect the line to the battery. In my case, I just shoved it into the clamp. Is that the most fancy? No. I could have, and in fact, I'm probably going to do that. That circle over that nut, you can just take that nut off and throw a ring connector, crimp that to the end of the line, and cinch that down. So that's on the positive side, right? That's the positive side of the battery. The negative can go to the battery, or my recommendation is go to the car's ground. And generally, in most cars today, you can install the ground plug or lug is going to be like right by the negative battery terminal, wherever that's at. There's usually always some kind of bus for it. If using a mobile in a shack, a power supply will be required. A linear power supply, this is just general power supply talk here. Linear power supply will provide cleaner power, but switching supplies have improved a lot over the years to reduce noise. Now, vehicle ground. Most cars, as I mentioned, have a centralized ground tap for electronics. Connecting to that with the negative line on your radio is preferred. Now, everything I'm saying right now assumes you're using a fused radio power line. Not just one, but two is preferred. One on the positive, one on the negative. Inline fuses on your power line is very important. Almost all manual or mobile radios come with an inline fused wire or plug or, whatever for your radio. Make sure you use that. Make sure you have an inline fuse. Speaking of fuses, there are things called fuse add-ons. There are fuse jumpers, whatever. That's that little black thing with the upper circle on it. Many people will tell you that they won't work for your car. My VHF radio in my Nissan Leaf is connected with a fuse add-on. I wouldn't call it preferred, but you can do it. And it's been like that for years, and it's kind of fine. So, with that said, I don't think you should do this if you can avoid it, especially with HF radio. HF radio will not like this. It's adding too much noise into the whole system generally. So make sure you, if you do this, I would keep it to VHF UHF only. Now, the tip here, and you're going to see these little bold tips pop up now throughout the rest of the slides. I would recommend that you look at your fuse diagram to determine where you would add a fuse jumper like this. You generally want something that's going to have a bit of a higher amp draw, 10 amps being about where you're going. And remember, you still have the inline fuses on the power cord. So even though you may be using a 10 amp fuse on the fuse panel on your car, you want to still have the inline fuses to protect your radio. All right. So the firewall headache. And the reason why I bring this up after talking about the fuse situation or the fuse jumper situation is firewalls are a really pain in the butt to go through if you don't have a pass-through. So if your car is absolutely without a pass-through and you're kind of worried about drilling a hole, you can use a jumper, which is okay. But generally, I've been pretty lucky. All the cars that I've installed radios into have had a pass-through with an appropriate grommet in that hole. And that grommet helps prevent rubbing the shielding off of the cable while you're driving around, bouncing up and down the road and all that stuff. Getting a pass-through is another issue entirely. Many are really a pain in the butt to get to. Case in point, that red circle is where the firewall hole is on my Nissan Leaf, and you have to like reach around it. You have to hug the shock tower basically to get your hand back there. The clearance is awful, but that's the pass-through that exists, so that's what I made work. I think it took me like 15 minutes just to snake the wire through there. Not a fun time. Never a fun time generally working with firewalls. It's probably the worst part about setting up a mobile radio is getting the wire snaked through. But if you have access to it, easy access, then mobile radios are a snap to install and use. And don't cut the don't try and shorten the power lead by cutting the fused connectors. Don't do that. Leave the fused connectors in. You want to make sure you do that. So I'm getting a comment on Discord. Discord, what type of wire did you use? I used the wire that came with the radio. Again, most radios come with the power supply wires, the wires to supply power to the radio. Use that wire. Uber Geek says, never go through the door. All right, never go through the door. Only go through the window. Okay, so finding a place in your car. This can be tricky, right? The reality is that most VHF UHF radios that are coming out on the market, and I think all the mobile HF radios on the market have detachable faceplates. This makes things tremendously easier for getting the radio into your car, because now the body can be hidden away somewhere in your dashboard. Like, there's a lot of space actually up behind dashboards in most cases. Obviously, don't put it on in front of your airbag. That would be dangerous. But in between, like where the passenger sections meet in the middle, where there's that, I don't know what they call that pillar in the middle between passengers, there's actually usually space behind the electronics. So if you kind of take some stuff apart, you can see that, oh yeah, I can fit a radio back here, which is nice because then you're already up right near the firewall, so you can just snake the wire through that way, which is pretty easy. Some people will also be lucky enough that they'll have space underneath the seat, like the passenger seat. That is a fantastic place to put the body of a radio, and then it's just a matter of snaking the antenna wire to it and the power wire to it and then the head unit wire out. Now, the other thing that's kind of curious about mobile radios is that a lot of them don't come with the extension cables to remote the head unit. I know it sounds odd. You'd think that, oh yeah, this radio can be disconnected from the body, but they don't provide you the radio wire. So make sure that when you buy a mobile radio, if that's the road you're going down, that you make sure you include that extension cable, or make sure that it is offered in the box. I've assumed that incorrectly on a couple of radios I purchased, and I've ended up having to go back to HRO and buy that wire. Okay, so you've seen the pictures of my radio install, and this is how I mount it. There are many good ways to mount mobile radios in a car. I happen to use a Lido mount seat car bolt arm. So it uses the seat bolt of the passenger seat and has an arm that comes up, and then that connects to a ball joint. That ball joint has a metal bracket, which I have oriented vertically, and then the radio is attached to the front of that bracket. Dan, $4.99, thank you very much. You can use a cell phone magnet mount to hold the screen up. Takedown is easy if you want to bring it back into the shack. Sure, yeah, why not? Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit. I think I got a question on Discord that I took a screenshot of that is going to be later. Somebody was asking if there's any mobile radios that can be like docked and disconnected and walked out. I mean, everything you can do that with anything, but there's nothing that has like a docking station that you drop a radio into and then just quick click and it comes out. These are all like coax connections and plastic power connectors. They're not really meant to be disconnected and reconnected and disconnected and reconnected over and over and over again. So keep that in mind when you start trying to make a modular system. It seldom works out as well as you think it will as time goes on. You start getting really tired of it. At least that was my experience. So LiDO mounts, like I said, that's the vertical arm with the ball joint. That's what it comes with. And then you add in the bracket arm if you have 2 radios, or whatever adapter plate for the brand of radio that you have. In my case, 2 Yaesu radios. Now, I also just go the cheap way, and I use double-sided tape. I use 3M heavy-duty industrial double-sided tape. That's what's holding the head unit on the TYT 9800 to the car. It has only fallen off once, and I've had to replace the tape. Only one time in the over 5 years it's been installed in the Xterra. And the only reason it fell off was because we had a prolonged period of 110 degrees, and it just kind of got soft and fell off. All right, so I've recommended you use a detachable head unit radio, and you bury that body of the radio somewhere. Well, what does that cause? Well, that's where your speaker is. The speaker's connected to the body of the radio, so you just buried that somewhere. What are you going to do? Well, you're probably going to have an external speaker to make that work out. I generally prefer external speakers in almost all cases for radios. They sound much richer. They have much higher quality on the speakers themselves, although there are exceptions. But by getting it separate from the head unit, you can put that speaker wherever you want, where it'll do kind of the most good with your application. Also, I have tons of other things going on in my car when I'm driving around, and I don't want radio to just take up everything, so I don't tap in to the car's audio system. Some of you may be different. Some of you may use a Bluetooth adapter or something like that to get connection. That's fine if that's your thing. Cool. I like to have separate audio. So the AM radio in the car is on, its own speakers. I can turn that down. If somebody calls, I can take the call. Still having ham radio in the background, that kind of stuff if I want to. And so here's some speakers that I have in my car. Notice that the wire on the left-hand side actually goes into the front console of the Nissan Leaf. And for the TYT 9800, a fun little thing I did was I actually used the AC vent to feed it into the dashboard there, and that's actually where the radio is, behind the front radios of the car. Also, that Vertex speaker that is above the 9800 is fantastic. That is a very, very loud speaker. And I believe it's pretty inexpensive. I think it's under like $40. Really, really good speaker. Big, though. Real big. Okay, so mounting VHF UHF radios. Using VHF UHF radios is easy. It's easy in mobile applications. It's not as easy as using an HT. That's nothing. K8 MRD radio stuff. I'm going through mobile install now. Perfect timing. I prefer 556. I do too, but 762. Sorry, I prefer 762 by 762 by 39. So thank you. I appreciate that, Mike. Okay. So VHF UHF antennas. This is kind of where we're going to talk about antennas now, and we're going to cover VHF, UHF, and HF. So the real talk on this is it's not hard. It really is not hard. If you've been putting off doing a mobile install because you're worried about this, that, and the other, it's not. There is a finite number of steps that you have to do. If you don't get the results you're expecting, you do the next step. And if you don't like the results still, you do the next step. And on and on and on until it's right where you want it to be. So if you're holding back for any reason, don't. You shouldn't. At the end of the day, I put a diamond antenna or a comet antenna on my car using a mount that is retail purchasable, and I call it a day for VHF UHF. That's all I do. I don't do anything complicated. I have done SWR tests. I absolutely recommend you do that if you want to, but if the radio's not freaking out at you, not complaining about high SWR, getting too hot, overheating, whatever, after prolonged transmitting, then your antenna system is probably okay. You still should check it, but you don't necessarily have to You don't necessarily have to have an SWR meter in line on the coax, right? You can set it up once, check it, and then get it out of there and just get on with your life. VHF radios are not that hard. You really should just get out there with it and have fun. So that's my big thing of this whole slide package is just do it, man. Just do it. Have some fun. So I use lip mounts more often than not. Lip mounts are great because they can go on the hood. They can go on the top trim of the doors in your car. If you have, like the Nissan Xterra has just a flat line of a door top. You just can throw that lip mount right on top of it. Works perfectly. And then trunk lids and hatches for hatchbacks all work fine. This is the Nissan Leaf with its mount. I'll talk about mounts a little bit later in the video, but I think that's a Comet mount. Or no, I think that's a Diamond. I take that back. That's a PL259. Generally, lip mounts, all mounts are going to come in PL259 or NMO. NMOs are great, so are PL259. Either way you want to go is generally because you own one type of antenna versus another type of antenna. Good Game Ham Radio and Outdoors, he says 762 because we can't let the super chats lapse. Well, thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. Yeah, so that's my lip mount on my Nissan for VHF UHF. My HF looks differently, and it's an important distinction that we're going to talk about. So left side is the Nissan Leaf with the diamond mount, and on the right-hand side, it's actually kind of a homebrew mount that I did for my Xterra. That is actually like a CB radio antenna mount for like a Fire Stick. And I liked the way I installed it in behind the rear light of the Xterra. So what I did was I got a PL259 bulkhead or threaded pass-through connector. And I used two nuts, and I sandwiched it onto the mount. Used a little bit of Loctite. Loctite only on those nuts, not on the coax and not on the antenna. And it has been like that for going on 5 years, and it's worked flawlessly. So it's easy. You can find a way relatively easily. Big shout out to everybody at the HRO in Anaheim, but I would venture a guess and say that they do this for everybody. You walk in there or drive there, hopefully drive there, with your car. You go in there and say, I need to get an antenna on this thing. Help me out. And they say, where's your car? Let's go look at it. Walk outside. They'll take a look at it and say, oh, okay, I recommend you go with this, that, and the other. They'll open it out of the box and they'll show you how it goes in. On my first mobile setup ever, it was Billy Bob helped me out. He was like, oh yeah, you just go with this, done. Easy. So always would recommend that you go with listening to what they say at HRO. And for anybody commenting, I shouldn't have said Loctite. There are a few things that get people commenting faster when you mention Loctite. Oh, I wouldn't use Loctite. I was using blue Loctite, and it was only for holding the threaded buoy on that metal arm. Not anything to do with the threads for the antenna or the coax. You don't want that to have Loctite on it. So in case I wasn't specific enough when I first said it there, I've been very clear now. Okay, so speaking of mounts, this is what I use for HF. It is the K400C by Diamond. And both of these mounts, whether it's VHF, UHF, or HF, they have the PL259 right there. You can see it. It comes with a run of coax, and they have an extension for lengthening that cable if you need to. There are old wives' tales, urban legends, on ham radio and coax for mobile installations. Don't worry about any of that stuff. There is no number of feet in which it becomes problematic. Don't make it overly long, but at the same time, there's no magic number you have to get into. That whole like 13 feet thing, don't worry about that. It's not a big deal. So notice on this one, the 400 has a much wider footprint, which I think I show. No. I'll show it later. You'll see it on my screwdriver antenna. Okay, so mag mounts. Mag mounts are fantastic. If that's what you have available, use a mag mount. Great. They work fine. I think for VHF, UHF, they're generally fine. You don't have to really go much further than a mag mount. However, it's not really the cleanest install. Usually you've got some kind of cable that's going down the roof. And by the way, the roof of the car, get that as high up and as centered on the biggest metal thing in your car. Get that thing right smack dab on top of it. And that's generally the best place to put a mobile antenna to begin with. Okay? With that said, though, mag mounts, throw that bad boy right on top there, snake that wire inside, and you're good to go. Mag mounts kind of make for the most portable setup, because you can go from the car, you can completely take the antenna off of it, and you can go back inside the house, and you can play radio that way. My tips here are mag mounts work in home space as well. You just slap the magnet onto something like a metal filing cabinet, and they work great, so you can use that. Maybe don't get too close to it when you're transmitting it at 50 watts. Maybe get away from it a little bit. Keep your family from playing with the antenna. And again, yeah, mag mounts are good because you can place them right on the center of the roof. And if I haven't mentioned it, your car is like a big metal cage, right? To get the best signal going out of the antenna, the most effective place to put your antenna is right smack dab at the highest spot of the vehicle and centered on whatever the largest piece of metal is on that vehicle. That's the recommendations. Shane's in the house. I texted Shane earlier today, and he ghosted me. I needed his help, and he didn't send me what I needed. But I wanted to talk to him about bumper antennas. It's something that the police have in a lot of their cars. There's actually an antenna that's inside the bumper that they use in some cases. So HF radio is easy too, but there's a little bit more steps you have to do to make it successful. So HF radio in a vehicle, powering an HF, mounting the radio in your car, getting access to it by mounting the head unit somewhere. It's the same as VHF. Everything is the same. The difference is that the antenna systems are a bit different, right? That's the big appreciable difference with HF. So there's no reason that you can't make this work with HF as well. And there's graduating types of ways of doing HF antennas that we'll talk about. HF, though, requires a better ground plane, as in your connection to the car's ground or electrically bonding all the panels has to be done far better than you would for VHF UHF. All right, so bonding, again, is where you take all the metal components in a car. Likely they're not electrically connected together. There's paint on one bolting surface. There is a plastic washer because they are non-similar metals. There's so many reasons why cars are not bonded together as they kind of used to be in the past, but you can't, that won't work for HF. Philomeno Boy says, yerp. Thank you. So generally, all large, flat, metallic pieces should be electrically connected together, and therefore, and then also connected to the ground portion of wherever your car's ground is located. As long as they're all kind of connected together, you'll do all right. When they're bonded, when all the pieces are bonded together, it should drop the ambient noise floor significantly. And that's why we're doing this. Sure, you can connect any antenna to a radio. Doesn't matter. You don't need a ground plane. But by having a ground plane, particularly in a mobile, you will cut down on your ambient noise significantly. It will also help you get a match, an SWR match to your antenna, right? Because it's a part of the antenna system. Your whole car is. So basically what's happening when you don't bond something together, so like let's say you have a trunk in your car and your antenna is mounted on the trunk lid, but on the hood where you're above your engine, that's not connected to the body of the car or the frame of the car. It's just kind of floating in free space. It can kind of couple with your coax lines or your power lines, anything that it's picking up. It will almost act like an antenna, and that will raise your ambient noise floor up and cause, it'll be over S5, right, of just white noise that you're hearing on your mobile radio. So good to bond your radios for sure. And so here's an example of what I've done on a couple of spots on my car. This is one of the door hinges. So I'm using a metal grounding strap that comes pre-holed with grommets. Or, yeah, I just call it a grommet. You don't need to sand down surfaces, right? This is the big thing to take away. You don't need to ground down the surfaces to do this correctly. In fact, you don't want to do that because it'll incur rust and corrosion on your automobile. What you should do is use the double serrated lock washers, because what happens is when you apply torque, so the way I use these is I'll go serrated lock washer, regular washer, my ground strap, and then the nut that's holding it all together. So if you look on the right hand side of that image, there is a nut that's touching the ground strap, and then there's a washer underneath that, and then there's the serrated lock washers. When you get it torqued, the torque applied to that lock washer is going to bite it into the surface of the paint. And it doesn't require a lot. It just needs a little bit. It just needs to bite in a little bit to bite through the finish of the automobile and touch the base metal. That's all you're looking to do. You don't need to have sanded it down to bare metal or anything like that. Don't do that. Here's how I did it on my rear trunk hatch system. There's a ring connector on the left-hand side. The other side, I just folded folded the ground strap over, went through it with a self-tapping screw, and again used a serrated lock washer with a washer above it so it didn't get bound up in the bonding strap, and then just kind of slowly torqued it in until it got there, and then just left it alone. On the passenger side door, very similar setup. In fact, you can see the lock washer in that red circle. It's right flush up against the surface of the paint of the car, and just in there just a little bit. Lee Harrell says, bonding for HF only or all mobile radios? Absolutely, I recommend it for HF. You're really not going to know until you try VHF UHF if you need to bond or not. Generally, I do not. I do not do that. That's my thought, but let's see. Yeah. Okay. HF antennas. Okay. So you got your bonded antenna system. We've covered VHF, UHF antennas. Let's talk about HF antennas. So HF antennas can get a bit more complicated because if you think about it, a diamond quarter wave 2 meter 70 centimeter antenna is a couple of feet long. It's one piece of metal. You throw it on your car. You're done, right? You're done. Not so with ham radio HF antennas. HF antennas, like 20 meters, for instance, right? A quarter wave of that is 14 feet or thereabouts. So you got to have 14 feet of wire somewhere on your car to be an effective antenna for 20 meters. And then 40 meters, it's just even more than that, right? Quarter wave on 40 meters, you're looking at a lot of wire that you'd have to get up in the air. So HF antennas kind of, for mobile applications, get around that by using some kind of loading system, like ham sticks, right? Everybody's seen ham sticks before. They're monoband vertical antennas for HF. And when you look at it, that heat shrink kind of tubing that goes up the body of the antenna, you can see the actual wire that's coiling up the length of the rod that makes up the antenna system. That's really just a kind of an electrically long, it's 14 feet or however long, right, for 20 meters. It's just reduced in size by using coiling. And that's discussed in the technician's handbook. It's mentioned there, right? So I recommend, as you're getting started with HF Mobile, once you have an HF radio, just go buy a couple of ham sticks, the appropriate mount for them, and just have fun with 20, maybe 40 meters, get your feet wet, figure out how to get it tuned, get your bonding situation in order, that kind of stuff. And then you can always upgrade to a more expensive HF antenna as you go along. I always recommend people start out with the ham stick route first and foremost, so it should be no different for any of you. Now, the way I went, though, after using ham sticks for a little while was I got myself a screwdriver antenna. And now, a screwdriver antenna is kind of the same thing as a ham stick, but there's an extra bit of complication to it. So you still have a loading coil of sorts, a coil of wire that goes up vertically on a tube. And then there's an outer tube with a shorting arm or something like that. And it goes up and down the antenna, and it either adds more coils or subtracts coils from the total length of the antenna by shorting it out by going up and down. So it's basically going to adjust itself, or you're going to manually adjust it using some kind of tools like an electric switch or something like that, until you find the resonant spot for the frequency that you're trying to transmit on. That's kind of how they work. Mine is motorized. It connects to the radio specifically. They're kind of designed to work together, and so I don't have to do a whole lot. My HF Mobile, as I already mentioned, is a Yaesu AT120A, and it interfaces directly with the FT891. So when you have the coax connected to the 891, if the antenna is given a decent ground plane, then once you're on the frequency, you just hit a button, a tune button, and it will automatically go in there and adjust the vertical height of the antenna to match the frequency you're transmitting on. It doesn't require a secondary box like some other antennas do. MFJ sells a box that has a switch so you can control up or down on the antenna, and that's what lets you find the resonant point for where your frequency or your SWR curve will be the best. So that's kind of what I recommend. When I bought the AT120, I ended up having to mess around with bonding. Like, I talk about bonding a lot because I found that that's the most best time that you can spend in getting your mobile shat going is bonding. The more bonding you do, it will lower your noise floor. In fact, there are situations where your noise floor in your car is going to be better than that in your house because of RFI generators that you probably already have in your home. So doing a bit of work there is always worth it. Anyway, when I bought the antenna, I was playing around with what I had to bond to get the antenna to actually operate. What was happening was I'd click the tune button and it would just tune forever. It just kept spinning. It never found a dip in the SWR meter. Nothing worked until I got more parts of the car bonded together. And then once that happened, boom, it started working. So that's my tip there, is just do the time and get the bonding done. Also, multiband screwdriver antennas are super heavy. The ATOS is probably like the lightest weight screwdriver antenna on the market. Every other one are big boys, and they need a really strong mount system to hold them upright. And wind will mess with screwdrivers pretty fierce, so make sure you're taking the time to buy the right mount for the radio that you're connecting it to, or the antenna you're connecting it to. Okay, mobile HF antennas like screwdrivers are not cheap. So when you do this whole work, make sure you're saving the time to get yourself an appropriate mount as well. Because if you don't, you're going to break it. And what generally happens is if your mount isn't spec'd right for the antenna's weight that you're putting on it, as it takes up wind load, it'll bend, and actually can bend the hood of your car, the trunk of your car, whatever. So make sure you're taking the time to get the right mount. I've seen it. I've seen a car's hood that was like all tweaked, and the antenna was like 45 degrees because the wind came up, bent it over, because they kind of had it in a bad place on the hood of the car. Trucks are great for mounting antennas to, but they're very difficult to bond appropriately. If your car is cab on frame, bed on frame, not a unibody construction, then the odds are that the finishing of the cab and the bed, it's electrically disconnected from the frame, meaning that there's paint or something in between the frame and the trunk, or the bed and the frame and the cab. So you will have to bond all those things together. Exhaust systems on trucks, for some reason, are a big deal. They always create a lot of RFI. So go ahead and just consider you're going to have to bond that as well. Okay, so dealing with noise. Now, let's say you go through all this wonderful work, you get everything bonded, and you still have noise. Again, this is more for the HF people in the house that are trying to get HF mobile going. Vehicles can be incredibly noisy, right? Alternators are what people bring up all the time for mobile radio installations, in that they just put out a lot of RFI. So same with the HVAC systems. I know my AC in the Nissan Leaf actually puts out RFI on 20 meters, or maybe it's 40. It's one of those. But if I turn it off, it goes away instantly. It drops at like 3S units. So likely that there's some kind of grounding problem in line there. Generally, how you solve grounding problems with those type of devices is you need to make sure that they get back to that car's ground bus somewhere. It needs to get electrically connected, the body of the alternator, some component of your HVAC system has to connect to the ground. Philomeno Boy says, dude, who admits to driving a Leaf? I do, because I commute. Because I commute in major traffic. So it's nice to have a car that I can get into the carpool lane. Also, for those of you that don't know, I'll just mention this now. The electric cars, you know, they got those big honking batteries. So what electric cars do, when the 12-volt battery that is in the car for running radios and lights and all that stuff, when it starts to deplete, the drive battery will use an inverter to just power that 12-volt back up. So you charge up your drive battery, your hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of amp-hour drive battery, and you feed your ham radio off of that 12-volt accessory battery, you will be able to run ham radio for weeks without a charge if you're not driving, because your battery takes up, your radio takes up very little battery in the first place, and your car's drive battery will just top it off. So bug-out vehicles, not bad for ham radio types. Electric cars are great for that. Generally, hybrid and electric vehicles are well bonded because they kind of have to be, because it's all kind of electronic. You don't want to fry something or short something to ground and then electrocute your whole family, that kind of thing. The problem is that they do put a lot of RFI out just because of the voltages that we're talking about, the lengths of wires, all the stuff that's going on. They often have a ton of computers. So recommend that if you're going down that road, throw on some RF chokes. And what do I recommend for RF chokes? All right, so you guys know I mentioned Palomar Engineering before. Their code that they use is HRCC 73 or 73 HRCC, and I think you still get 10% off. I'm not affiliated with them. They were just nice enough to offer that to us. So I highly recommend their stuff, and in particular, the looped toroid cores, right? That donut right there that you see in the picture. Those are mandatory in my car. I have them on the power line and I have them on the coax, and I've run at least 5 loops through that ferrite core to get maximum amount of suppression of RFI, and I put it right at the input of the radio, and that seems to knock the noise down significantly. So if you have just super persistent noise RFI in your car on your mobile radio, one of the best things you can do kind of after you've tried everything is to try out one of these ferrite cores. And you definitely want more than 5 loops if you can. WJ6F says, ferrite on the positive and neg power cables made a huge difference in my mobile. Yeah, and there's a test you can do for this, right? And we'll walk through it. So if you're in front of your mobile radio and you just got all this noise and you're like, I don't know what to do, disconnect your antenna. Disconnect the antenna completely, and if the noise is still there, that means it's running along the power cord of your car into the radio itself via the power line. Throw the choke on the power line. Again, 5 wraps of the ferrite core at least. See if that knocks it down. If it does, then that's probably your problem, is you had some kind of like alternator noise or something like that was causing the problem. If, however, the noise disappears completely, that means your antenna is picking it up. So in that case, go check your bonding again. Make sure that all the parts of the car, the sheeting, all the doors, all that stuff is bonded appropriately. That's kind of how you can handle it. Chuck Taylor, why is 5 the magic number? Because generally most people have enough slack to put 5 on. And there is an attenuation value that I'm not remembering. But basically, every time the wire goes through the center connector, you're getting another multiplier of attenuation of RF off of the wire. I don't remember what it is, but it's somewhere between 5 to 7 is kind of the sweet spot. If you can put more, but, you know. Yes, those are all Mix 31 ferrites and toroid cores that you're looking at. Mix 31 is what you use for HF radio. All right. Now we're going to talk about radios. Not very long on talking about radios, but I'm just going to mention some of the ones that I've had experience with that I like. If your favorite radio is not on the list, that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that I just don't have much experience with it. All right, so there are a couple of radios on the market today in the mobile space. There's not as many as you'd expect anymore, but these are generally the ones I recommend. So the Yaesu FTM 400 is the radio I use today. I really like that radio. The ICOM ID 5100A Deluxe, also a good radio. Lots of people use it. The most time I've had with it is from playing with it in the HRO. Seems fine. The Yaesu kind of fit better into where I was putting it in my car, and so that's why I went with it. Though Anytone ATD 578 UV, I did a review on that radio. If you want tri-band, if you want DMR, that's kind of the way to go. The only downside is that it does not have a removable faceplate. The ICOM IC2730A, which I use in my home, it is fine analog-only radio. And Kenwood TM7 or V71A, that is an oldie but a goodie. It's a really nice radio. They've been around for quite a while. I don't believe you can remote that, though. The TYT 9800, that's in my Nissan Xterra. I've liked it from the moment I've had it. I can't say gushing things about it because it's a budget radio. It's a budget-friendly radio. It gets the job done. It's a dual-band radio with 50-watt output. It will do crossband repeat, which is probably its most attractive kind of note thing that you may want. Tip. Buying used is not a bad option for mobile radios because you can just bring a battery along with you and an antenna or a dummy load, and you can test it if it's local, right? If you go to a swap meet and you have this stuff on hand, you can test it out right there. So, bring a battery, bring an appropriate cable to test it. And often you don't need to use the manufacturer's plug. You just have to know where the positive and negative are and just connect it up that way. Of course, be really careful when you do that. Okay, so HF, there's even fewer options, and I really only think some of them are really good choices. In my car, the FT891 is what I'm using. I probably use that radio. I use that radio every time I get in the car, to be honest. I'm always listening at least, but definitely be talking on it when I can. The ICOM IC7100 is also good. That is kind of the all-in-one radio of choice. You have a all-in-one, which means it does VHF, UHF, and it does D-Star if you want to go down that road. The only thing that can get kind of difficult is how you mount it in a car. There are inventive ways to do that for the head unit because the head unit is remotable, so I would take a look at what people have done online. It's kind of a big boy, though. The body of the radio is quite big. KD9PBQ asks, how do you log mobile contacts? I use my phone. I use the app Ham Log, and I just type in a call sign and do it like that. And then I email myself the log after a couple weeks of filling it up. Oftentimes, though, when I'm using HF in my car, I'm hopping onto nets, and so I'm just giving my call out, and we're just talking. More of a rag chew environment. Although I've definitely I've chased soda in my car. I've worked event stations in my car. On my lunch break, it's great. Sometimes I'll just go sit in my car and play radio for a little bit. Really good stress reliever when you're at work and you want something to ease the tension. Just go to your car and play radio. The Shegu G90. So I put this on the list because it is a mobile radio. You can remote the head unit. It ticks all the boxes. The only downside is it's 20 watts. And it's kind of tiny screen to work in your car. So I'll let you decide. But I reviewed it favorably. I like the radio. But I didn't run it in a car. I don't know what that kind of would introduce as far as any issues there. And then lastly, the Kenwood TS480 HX and SAT. The HX is a 100 watt, or maybe I may have them backwards, but one of them is a 100 watt radio with a built-in auto tuner. and the other one is a 200 watt radio with no auto tuner. These are large boy radios though. It's a thick boy radio. The body of the thing is really, really big. It's really hard to kind of hide it somewhere in a car. You almost need a truck to fully hide that thing. Yeah, the HX is 200. Thanks for that. Good game. Like a truck would be great with this one. This is a nice front panel. It is also a remote front panel. I like the front panel on it. Very straightforward, not complicated to use at all. I was a big fan of it when I reviewed it. And again, I reviewed that radio as well, so if you're interested in that, check that out. Okay, so questions. I asked if there was any questions on the Discord, and I got a bunch of replies, so I'm going to walk through them right now. And then I'll also look in the chat here as we go along, so feel free to ask your questions. All right, so as a complete and utter noob owning a Baofeng, how do I get started with mobile radio? I'll give you a hot take on this one. And I'm giving you this hot take because I did this for a long time. I used to run a diamond quarter wave, VHF UHF, actually the same mount that I have on that Nissan Leaf on my Honda S2000. And I would snake the coax from the trunk into the glove box, which is kind of weird on the S2000. And I would, every day, I would disconnect the SMA, twist on the SMA on my Yaesu FT60. And then I would play radio, and I'd use a hand mic, all this stuff. Nightmare. What a nightmare. If you can swing it, buy a mobile radio and just be done with it. I hate to say that. I hate to tell you, like, yeah, go spend money, kid. But it's just such a not fun way to play radio is using an HT in your car. You can, yeah, Craig Walker says get an SMA to BNC adapter. I eventually did that. That actually was revolutionary. But I'm just not a big fan of doing HTs that you use in the car and then you disconnect it and you go about your business. I don't know. I feel like save up and buy a mobile and kind of do it right, and you're going to enjoy it a lot more. Because mobiles are a different kind of operator. You operate differently with a mobile kind of than you would with an HT. At least that's my feeling. What's the best way to handle mobile radios in a place where 100 degrees Fahrenheit daytime temperatures is common? They're common like that in California as well, where I live, and I haven't had to do anything. The biggest thing I'll tell you, though, is put up a windscreen or windshield, whatever, sunshade. I put that up when I'm at work. At work, the parking lot is really, really bright. The orientation of the cars, you really get slammed with sunlight. So I would do that as the most, which is also nice because then you can go in your car with the sunshade and you can play radio, and it's nice and inviting. The Owl asks, do I have to drill a hole through the roof of the car in order to install an antenna? No, and if you're watching this, Owl, I didn't mention anything about drilling. I have not drilled a hole in my car. Hot take. Now, with that said, if you want to do that, what a wonderful way to go. You can get what's called NMO mount systems for antennas. They make NMO mount antennas, but basically it's a, pop a hole. You probably have to take the headliner down on the car, and it's two parts. You kind of slide it in and then you tighten it down. It's got an O-ring on the inside. That works fine and really highly regarded, actually. Shane may still be in the chat. I know he'll tell you that, they definitely pop holes for cop cars that he works on. Killer Spud says, I need some good 20-meter mobile antenna options for a Jeep Wrangler. Anything I mentioned is the way to go. Go with the ham sticks. They're very simple. They'll be less than $100, and you'll get 3 bands. Got 3 bands at least for under $100 with the mount. Very inexpensive. The only thing you may have to deal with is bonding and grounding for the ham sticks on a Wrangler. Now, I will mention, Jeeps in particular, the Wranglers seem to have a big problem with grounding. I know a lot of hams, when they step up to HF, that they run into trouble. And part of it, I think, is because it doesn't have a lot of body panels. There's not a lot of stuff to connect the radio, the antennas to. You don't have a lot of exposed roll cage bar, and even then, that's not really a refined look when you've got an antenna just sticking off of a bar kind of thing. So Wranglers need a little bit more work, and I'm not the guy to give you the information on that one. But ham sticks are the way to go if you're starting out. All right, more questions. Ooch asks, I have a Nagoya mag mount on my car and a Baofeng UV5R hooked up to it. I've been told the SWR readings can vary greatly depending on where the mag mount is located. Is this true? If so, then wouldn't you say an SWR meter is an absolute necessity for a new ham owner? Which SWR would you recommend that is cost effective? Thank you. So no, yes, no, maybe, kinda, sorta, yes, no. Anyway, yes, you should have an SWR meter. I'm not against that idea. Will the SWR change depending on where you put it on the roof of your car? Maybe. Greatly, though, no, probably not. But maybe I'm wrong. What I would recommend you do is you set it all up and, you know, take an SWR reading, sure. And if the SWR reading is good on a couple of frequencies that you talk on the most, then just disconnect it and move on with your life. I don't see a big reason why you have to have an SWR meter connected to the radio, because, again, the radio is going to tell you if it's got a problem. It's also going to get really hot. It'll overheat. Oh, he did say Baofeng, though. Baofengs don't have an SWR readout. Yeah, the 1958 John Deere says SWR does change when moved around. No, I'm not questioning that. I'm saying greatly, not exactly greatly when the frequency is not moving. T-Man, KI5BEZ says 223. You know the deal. Gotta love them freedom seats. Right on. How practical is to use the handheld as base station by having a Yagi LDPA installed at home and replacing the HT antenna? It's not. I mean, it's not. You know, going back to what I said earlier about running mobile in my car, HTs are 5 watts. That's not, you don't want to live that 5-watt lifestyle unless you're like, and we're not talking QRP and ham radio. We're not talking about that, right? I'm talking about like mobile installation. There's no reason that you have to restrict yourself with 5 watts on an HT. Just, you know, go with a mobile, right? There's no reason not to. Now, the person mentions that they do have a Yagi. Yagi on a Baofeng, Yagi on a handy talkie. I mean, sure, that's going to help out a lot, but, you know, why not throw a proper mobile on that, get the 50 watts, and you're going to like it a lot more. Harry Bolognese says, just wanted to say great content. And hashtag SWED. I don't know what the SWED is. But thank you. Appreciate it. And let's see. Is there a mobile designed to go between your car and your shack? One radio to rule them all. So yeah, this is the comment I was trying to remember. No, there's no, like, you know how like a laptop, you can get a laptop docking station and one connects to home with monitors and the other connects to at work with monitors, and you clip it into the docking station and boom, you're all set. No, nothing exists like that. And like I said, you've got antenna connections, you've got power connections, you've got all that stuff you have to deal with. So no, not really. Josephus asks, thought you might dig this cycling hat. I do dig this cycling hat. Thank you very much. All right. Alex H. asks, 86 DM Dennis says 762. I agree, Dennis. Important info. Thanks. I appreciate you watching. Thank you very much. And appreciate the support. Alex H. asks, do you think setting up an APRS digipeater on your car is worth it for events or hiking to extend the range of your handy talkie for APRS? Initially, I was kind of meh about it, but then the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Digipeat the HT signal out at 50 watts? Yeah, why not? I mean, sure. I mean, how effective is it going to be if you're in the middle of nowhere surrounded by mountains? Maybe not, but yeah, what the heck? Fun project, right? Ham radio is all about doing stuff like that, so have fun with it. Item 2, would it be better to run a separate antenna for 70 centimeters and 2 meters, or is one fine? One is fine. Unless you're like really trying to maximize what you're doing, no, one's fine. Don't sweat it. James Hannibal says mobile Digipete works great. Oh yeah, I'm sure it works fantastic. Yeah, why not? I mean, yeah. So Zaitsev, is Vasily Zaitsev, I assume. KE0YNA asks, any recommendations for a more hidden antenna option on a car? Perhaps something that replaces the standard FM antenna on the vehicle. Yeah, there's plenty of people who've done that. They've got them wired up to where your VHF UHF antenna is the antenna mount for your car. Yeah, why not? You can do that. I mean, do you need to? No. The picture there, that nub, that antenna is like this big. It's 440 only, or sorry, 70 centimeter only. But that uses an NMO mount, and you can just put that on top of the car, and you're good to go. The reason I was bugging Shane earlier was like, hey, what's the deal with that antenna that goes in the bumpers of the police cruisers? Who makes it? You know, what's it all about? So hopefully he'll tell me, and then I can give that info out. But yeah, you can use that. Again, those aren't very effective antennas, though, right? That little layered NMO thing that's right there, that's not putting out, you know, you're not getting a lot of power out of that thing, or effectively getting it out. So you may be able to hit a repeater, but you're not going to be making long distance FM contacts or simplex contacts with that at all. So I wouldn't go that route unless you absolutely had to. I don't know why it needs to be hidden, but I won't assume. Thank you, Toys Are for Boys, for $6.66. Late as usual, but I'll rewind the tape and watch from the start. Oh, thank you for copying this to tape. That's good. Good archiving system. Jay Russ says, thanks for the encouragement. Got my call today. Congratulations. That's awesome. And KC8FMS, wife and I appreciate the podcast with your wife. So fun. Keep it up. God bless you. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the super chat. And I didn't get to do a podcast with my wife. This week has been rather intense. I had to shift my work schedule to go in early so that I can come home early. Pretty wild. So I'll leave it at that. Dank Radio asks, is the 7100 worth it? Yes. Yes. Unequivocally, yes, if you wanted to use it kind of just like a fun base station. And yes, in a mobile situation, if you have the space for the thick boy body and the head unit, which, look it up. Look up the 7100. In fact, we'll look it up because we're going to wrap this up and we're going to go to the Discord here shortly. Make sure you go to the Discord link if you want to ask more questions or continue this discussion for ham radio related topics. We're going to go to the Discord, and that's where we do our after chat. But the 7100 body is pretty big, and the head unit is kind of like an alarm clock would be the word that I would give. It's kind of got it's got a base plate and then a slanted view to it. So, yeah, you know. Uber Geek says, but will the 7100 hit a repeater 32 miles away? Yes. I mean, I can hit a repeater that's 50 miles away on an HT, so sure. I guess it depends on the repeater. People ask me that all the time, by the way. I will share a little pain that I experience. I get questions every day. And I will, not every day, but often someone will say, can I hit a repeater that's 30 miles from my house? That's it. Or they'll say with a Baofeng. And I will inevitably have to say, I don't know, because I don't know what that repeater is. I don't know how high up the repeater is. I don't know what kind of antenna the repeater is. I don't know if the Baofeng user has an upgraded antenna or an external antenna. I just don't know. There's not enough information for me to answer that question. So, yeah. So give me more information is what I'm saying if you're going to ask me about repeaters. Okay, so that was my last question. I hope that, or last slide, really. I hope that was helpful for everybody and that everybody had fun. I had fun putting those slides together. Mobile radio has been a lot of fun for me. I'm not far off from hopefully doing a POTA activation here from my car, right? As Mike will tell you, you just have to be within the park. Doesn't matter if you're operating from inside your car. So I will be operating from, hopefully, my FT891 here in the future. Maybe do a POTA. So, yeah, right on. Okay, what do I got to do now? Well, again, this was a Patron Picks episode. And a lot of this channel is funded, the things I buy to review, to try and maintain an open and honest a scenario as possible when I review stuff. I really try to remain objective. is I can use the money from Patreon to buy things, right? And then kind of give you my thoughts on them. So patron picks is one of my perks that I give for a certain level of the patrons over on patreon.com. And it is picking topics like this video we just did. Once a month, they pick, and I talk. They pick, I talk. And this was mobile radio. So big thank you to those patrons. And those patrons who voted for today, so if you didn't like this video, I'm going to give you the names of the people that you can go complain to. I'm kidding. Don't do that. But it was a good choice. It was a three-way tie, like I mentioned. Anyway. So definitely blame AD6DM Dennis for picking the show topic. I'm just kidding again. Andy, Andrew Crowley, Barbara Schrock, Bill McCurdy, Bill Wiggers, Bob Adams, Brad Braca. Did I say that right last week? Bracane? I hope I said it right. Bracane. Correct me if I said it wrong. William Huster, Brad Nadow, Brad Snyder, Corey Appleby, Daniel Sullivan, David Burns, David Dansero, David Gerald, Dennis Dunderdale, Zach Baker, Dennis Mickelson, Devin B. Hedge, Elias Brewer, Evan Hartman, FN 5.7 by 28, Franklin Lewis, Garrett Larson, Harald Kelso, Charlie Hunter, Good Game, Ham Radio and Outdoors. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate the support. The Grimus, Herb Brasington, Hercules KC1LZR, IC904, Jace Ravenfield, Jake Mall, Wyoming Ham. Thanks again, buddy. Again, Wyoming Ham's been awesome. He sends me stuff. I review it. So he buys things, ships it to me. I review it, and then I ship it off to him. What a fantastic system we worked out. Thank you, Wyoming Ham. I appreciate it. James Garner, James Tartamella, Jason Brown, Jason Jenkins, Jason Legg, Harald Carpenter, Jeremy Williams, Jim B., Floyd Crawford, Ken White, John Flowers, John Jensel, John Miller, John Molnar, Jonathan Williams, Jonathan York, Justin Yos, William Magyar, Ken Hall, Kenny Miyamoto, Kevin Adams, Christopher Keener, Lee Harrell, Mark Chase, Mossy, Matt Y., Jergeshevich, Michael Hunt, Michael Iafredo, Michael Simonis, Michael Brennick, Mike Heerley, Monvel Mascu, Mystic Storm, Nick Smith, Tom Wright, Philip Castile Jr., Randall Hensley, Raymond Cracker, Richard Swartz, Rob K8BCR, Rob Zarges, Robert Roman Toledo, Todd Agostini, Ron Thorson, Scott KN6IHC, Sean Bales, KJ7ITX, Simon Deards, VK3FSPD, Stephen Cardew, Stephen Hunter, Steve Blanford, Stevie Barker, Tan Hat, and Jeff the Pigeon Man, and Mark Wolf. All of the names that I mentioned, please go check your inboxes here in a couple of days. I sent out something to you all for the support. Thank you very much. Because I have, obviously, my new logo. I have new stickers. We are working on the merch, which hopefully I will have the website up soon. Actually, my wife will have the website up soon. Thank you so much, Leia, for doing that. And so, yeah, you'll be able to get this wonderful pint glass, which has green in it. So that's why it doesn't show up very well. Brett Glass asks, are those your patron backers? Those are some of my patron backers. And again, thank you all to all the patrons. I appreciate every one of you. So thank you for that. Because again, it does keep the channel going and allows me to do the things like I do to keep moving forward with all this. Streaming actually like this is not generally that cheap. There's monthly expenses that go into all this stuff generally. So anyway, appreciate it. Again, thank you so much. Keep up the podcast, Jeeper Creeper says. I will. And my wife, I think, we really got to keep her happy. So if you like the podcast, the link is in the description for the podcast anyway. Go listen to the podcast. If you like it, review it on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you find it, right? And leave her a comment. Say what you like about it. That'll keep her. We got to keep her motivated, guys. She doesn't have her license. I'm making her sit in a ham radio podcast. I can only keep this fish on the line for so long here, guys. All right. We're going to the Discord. And I will talk to you one-on-one here shortly on the Discord. So thanks again. I appreciate it. I'll see you later.